All right, beautiful people, welcome back. My name is Jonathan, episode 115. On today's program, we have Zizi. Zizi is an extraordinary being. He has a great mind, he has great insight on so many things. First and foremost, before I even get started, I'm going to say, Zizi, thank you so much for coming on today's show. How are you doing?
Thank you, Jonathan. It's an honor to be sharing the space with you. I'm looking forward to breaking bread with you and diving deep. Yeah, just honored to be in your presence with your audience.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's definitely felt on my end as well too. You've been doing a lot of great things, and what really intrigued me about what you have accomplished and all of your peers is that you guys have actually created a community where you're actually living off of the grid. So like you formed your own community, and it's not just a community, it has, a spiritual essence in it. It's beings of a higher conscious, of a higher awakening. I just think that's phenomenal because especially the times that we're in right now, there's so many people who are tired of the system and the way that things are going. Some people call it the matrix. And a lot of people are looking to go out and buy a piece of land and form a community and so on and so forth. But, it's one thing when you talk about it, and it's another thing when you're actually living it. So I guess I want to start this conversation off by asking you, whose idea was it and how did it come about? Was it like a collective? Was it your idea or somebody else? Like, how did this process begin?
Yeah, thank you very much for that. A bit of both. Obviously, there's a personal journey. That is my story of how I got here, but there's also a collective element to it. Everyone who's in the community, we all sort of manifested this collectively, but individually. Everyone who's here will pretty much tell you that they were looking to live within a community, to leave the system, so to speak, to go off grid, to learn how to be self-sufficient. They were done with the system. So, in broader terms, I guess I was the catalyst for that, but I definitely didn't manifest this on my own. It was definitely a collective manifestation of like-minded souls. Um, yeah, I'll start from there.
What was your story like? Are you originally from the US or are you from Portugal or Europe?
No, I was in the UK. I was living in the UK,
UK, okay.
United Kingdom. Yeah, I was living a copy and paste life, as they call it. Had a job, the usual.
Right.
And then I had an awakening in 2016.
Mm,
I call it a spiritual awakening in 2016,
mm,
where it really began. I had an existential crisis, as they call it. And I began to question a lot of things about myself, who I am, the meaning of life, what is the point of all of this. I got really depressed, and yeah, it led me down a path of really seeking self, digging deep into asking some deep questions. And cut a long story short, the power of the internet led me down a deep rabbit hole that completely revolutionized my entire perception of reality and life as I know it. And that was the beginning of my journey, really. And
mm,
I went through different stages and phases of my awakening: the anger phase, the denial phase, the acceptance phase, the action phase, the transformation phase, the building phase. So, and still going through those phases even now. So, yeah, 2016, I had my so called awakening. I began my journey, and my awakening came through flat Earth.
mm.
Uh, Looking into this flat Earth theory, and I did my experiments, I did my research, and that just changed everything for me. It was the smoking gun, I call it.
Mm.
And yeah, and I became a flat Earth activist, for lack of a better term. I started a YouTube channel. I started researching. I started sharing what I was researching and finding with people. I gathered somewhat of a following through my research. And then about 2018, I got to a point where I had another smaller awakening, I guess. And I thought to myself, well, where is all of this going? You know, we're all talking about all these truths and all these conspiracies. What is the point? Where does this end? And even if the whole world awoke, or most of people awoke, the people who are perpetrating these so-called conspiracies are not just going to fold, they're going to fight back. That was my thought process at the time. They're not just going to let go of the system that they've been running for such a long time, whoever they are. So when this realization came to me, it was very apparent to me that I needed to do something radical, something very different. And simply staying in the system and playing along and hoping that things will somehow change on their own was just not sustainable or realistic, in my opinion, at the time. So I started making plans to really exit the matrix, pull my futures, we call children here futures, out of school, leave work, as I note in the matrix, built a camper home, a motor home, and decided to go on the road and just be off the grid and on the road. And that was a big
that is so powerful, so powerful. I remember in 2008, I had a similar experience, and I ended up living in the woods for 2 months. But then when I came out of the woods, I could see the matrix for what it was, and I began to really dig deep into research. And as the years progressed, I've noticed a pattern amongst people that have a spiritual awakening. Normally, it's like they're living in this matrix. They're, copy and paste, as you would say it. And then all of a sudden, they realize that things aren't exactly what they seem to be. The government isn't what it seems to be. Hollywood, the food, the religions, everything, every sector that makes up the matrix, they begin to kind of look through the veil and realize that it's just illusions, smoke and mirrors. And so next, the stage is normally like a conspiracy stage. You start going down these conspiracies, you start really, really digging deep. And I realized that a lot of people get stuck right there in that conspiracy stage. But then you can even go further, and then you start finding teachers and start watching programs like what you guys are doing. And you start watching information like that. You start watching Ralph Smart. You might dig down and watch Bruce Lipton and all these other magnificent teachers. There's so many out there, from Bobby Hemmett. Depending on where you come from, you start finding all your teachers, start reading books, and then maybe you'll go down and you actually start practicing yoga, Tai Chi, or something like that. And then eventually you just kind of come to a higher and higher and higher understanding. Would you say that based on your experience that you realize a similar pattern amongst people, or do you kind of see it differently?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I came to terms with, and I'm still coming to terms with, is realizing that we're all so different. Every single one of us on Earth is at different stages. We have different life paths. We have different missions. We have different soul groups. So there's a mixing pot of experiences that we're all sharing on the same stage, so to speak. And when we say people, I'm awake or I had an awakening, it's not a generalized term. An awakening is not something that we all have and it's exactly the same. It's on different levels depending on where your spiritual journey or your soul journey is. So for some people, they'll have an awakening, and for them, the awakening, their cap is to just ask questions and do nothing more than ask questions. And they'll continue in that loop of just asking questions, the conspiracy theorists online, for years and years and years, that people have been doing it for 20, 30 years. So it's not a new concept, conspiracy theorist. And then there are those who are maybe slightly more mature spiritually, where they will reach that next level, where they will look for practices to support that questioning, I suppose, where they'll go into spiritual practice. And then there's the next layer, which is the transformation. Then the next layer, which is action. The next layer. So there are all these different layers. And depending on where you are spiritually, knowing yourself, your soul will lead you to where you need to be for your journey. So it's not a one size fits all. That's for sure.
Beautifully said. So I want to dig into the community a little bit. I think it was Krishna Nahardi. He said that environment is more powerful than willpower. And I found this to be true, that your environment totally shapes you. Whether if you're a plant, if you're an animal, whatever have you, your environment is going to have a big, big effect on the way that you perceive reality and the way that you actually attract things into your life. So the first question that I have for you is, when you left the Matrix and then now you're in this community, what are some of the changes that you've experienced and you notice amongst yourself physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, just in all of those realms and all of those different aspects of life?
That's a really good question. Yeah, absolutely. Environment is key to everything. When we go into the science of it, we're electromagnetic beings within our core, meaning that we transmit and transmute frequencies in the form of information, in the form of vibration, what we call feelings, what we call thoughts, um, physically, even what we call diseases. Those are all transmuted through frequencies. It's got nothing to do with germs or viruses. All that is, in my opinion, is not the full picture. We really are electromagnetic. So when you live in an environment that is toxic, so to speak, or that is not clear, that doesn't have clear channels of communication or information, there's a lot of distortion. And when there's distortion, there's dis-ease in the mind, in the body, in the soul. You can't find yourself. You don't know who your true self is. And this is what the Matrix is. It's grouped all these people with all these different frequencies and all these different things happening. And we all live in these tight spaces. And of course, because we live in these tight spaces, there is no room for your soul to calibrate itself, to find itself, because there's so much noise electromagnetically in a frequency capacity. And this is what's happening in the Matrix. And this is how everyone has been kept so-called asleep to a large extent. And this extends to the foods that we eat, the water that we drink, all the things that we interact with in this virtual reality. Everything is communication, it's all full of information. So when you leave a matrix or a grid system and you come out into nature, there is less distortion. Your auric field has more room to interact with the natural world, with the plants, with the clouds, with the trees, with the soil, with everything that is natural. And as far as we're concerned, God is nature. That's where God really resides. God resides in nature. That's what God is. Beautiful. So when you're in nature and you're living naturally as a supernatural being, you are living according to God's law. That's what you call natural law. And everything starts to change. You start to have clarity. You start to learn to find yourself. This is where your true awakening really, really begins. And I say true awakening because when we're awakening in the matrix, our deeper inner truth is diluted with a lot of preconceived truths that we're given, right? So a lot of people will say, well, I know the truth. But when you really dig down, you say, well, the truth that you're talking about is truth that you read on in a book somewhere. It's truth that you saw on a video somewhere. It's not actually your truth. It's something that you've been given externally by someone else. When you are in a supernatural state, the truth comes from within. It's not something you can read. It's not something you can have a reference for. It's not something that you can say, this is where I got it from. It comes innately from within. It comes from nature. It comes from God. Some people call this a download, or I'm channeling. This is when you are truly in tune with the supernatural, the Akashic records. And nature aids that. And not to say it doesn't happen when you're not in nature, but it's so much more clearer when you're in nature. You begin to shed the layers of carbon, so to speak, within your psyche, within yourself, within your processing systems. Everything's so much more clearer. And this is the journey. And it's not a I've got to give you a disclaimer. If you go down the supernatural route, especially if you're around other supernatural beings, it really accelerates that awakening, and it can be very traumatic, right? Very, very traumatic. So it's almost like being asleep for a long time, for a week maybe. You've been in a coma, and you wake up in a burning house, right? You're asleep, and all of a sudden you woke up and the house is burning, and you've got the shock of it is very visceral. And this is what it's like when you create this environment of extreme ascension, so to speak, awakening. And it's very turbulent. You purge a lot. There's a lot of projection. There's a lot of mirrors. But it's also very rewarding at the same time. You grow spiritually so much quicker than you would anywhere else.
So powerful. I resonate with it 100%. It's interesting because you talked about like what we read in the book and what we think learning is, and how we get our information, right? We have the media, the radio, the internet, books, things of that nature. But really, right, you have your own truth. You get that through experience, and that's how like wisdom comes to you. When I was younger, I had the luxury of being homeschooled. My mom was a teacher. She's been teaching for 40 years. So I was homeschooled up until about the age of 12. And then I went to high school, or junior high for a little bit, high school, dropped out of high school, didn't like it, got my GED, went to college, dropped out of college, and then went back to college and graduated. So I kind of had experiences like all around. But the reason why I bring this up is because when we think about school, and I've noticed this during the pandemic or the plandemic or scandemic, whatever you want to call it, but a lot of people, well, most students were being trained or taught from a laptop just like this. And nowadays we have YouTube, we have so many different platforms where we can get information. And that's kind of like the way that most people learn. They, or so-called learn, they retain something and then they give you a test and you regurgitate it. And based on the answers, the multiple choice, true or false or whatever, if you do a good job, then they say, okay, you're smart, you get an A. But that really isn't education. So I'm bringing this up because what is the process like with the, what do you call them, the futures, which I think is a good name for children? Well, what is that process like? What type of schooling or education or training? How do you go about that in this type of community?
Yeah, so our philosophy, our overarching philosophy as a community is realizing that this thing that we call life on earth in its essence is a virtual reality. The ancients called it the Maya, they called it the illusion, they called it the matrix. That's what matrix means. It's a hologram. It is not something that is, they aren't set, what can I call it? They aren't set parameters or rules as to what is right and what is wrong. As human beings, we are the ultimate embodiment of what God is. We are the microcosm of God. We
Absolutely.
are God in quality, but not in quantity. So as such, when you reach a certain level of awareness or awakening, you realize that you are God. You can create, you can change this reality, you can create new realities, you can shape anything you put your mind to and your will and your action. And it begins really in the mind. So once you have a clear mind and you have really deprogrammed from all the programs of what you were taught to think and how you were taught to think, once you know how to really think for yourself and really from a deep sense, and then you're able to transmute those thoughts into your feelings. You're not reactive with your feelings. And this is where spiritual practices like meditation come in. So you're not reactive to how you feel about things. You're able to think using new pathways that are original thought. You're able to transmute emotions much more quicker from a higher perspective. You don't take things personally. You take nothing personally. You always realize that this is always a game. This is not forever. This is not real. You're here as a character. You're following different scripts. You're creating different scripts. It's not real. Remind yourself that this is a play. And when you do that, you're free from fear. You're free from anxiety. You really become a player character, so to speak. And the final step from that, from the thinking and the emotions, is the actions. Having the conviction, the willpower, the bravery to follow through, to be the change you wish to see, to action your magic, not just think your magic, not just feel your magic, to be your magic. A lot of people will talk about how they are magicians. I'm a magician, and I feel like a magician, and I think like a magician. Then you ask them, but do you act like a magician? Do you dress like a magician? Do you behave like a magician? Do you eat like a magician? Do you live like a magician? Same thing with sovereignty. I'm sovereign. I feel I'm sovereign in my mind and my soul. Yeah, but do you live like you're sovereign? So what we teach our futures, we don't have to teach them anything. We just have to embody what it is to be a God in flesh, a God incarnate. So I am a God being. My soul is a God being. It's a fractal of the all. as with every other being in this world. I'm incarnate in this carnal body, in this virtual reality, and I'm here to learn, experience, and through that learning and experience, my soul will grow, and through that growth, I will expand my awareness and my consciousness, and through that expansion of awareness and consciousness, I become a creator. I become a God that is creative and not just destructive or following scripts, but actually creating new realities. And this is the path that, at least here at Pineal, we are cultivating and culturing for ourselves, for our futures, and also being a beacon of light for anyone else who resonates or who's on that same path. Because remember, we're not all on the same path. Many are called, few are chosen.
So true. This is so powerful. I just love when you speak, man. This is such a great conversation so far. Those who are watching, if you're accepting this and you really do like it, do me a favor and make sure that you are following this young gentleman on all platforms, YouTube and also Instagram, under the Pineal Foundation. I believe you guys have a website also, and I think you have applications, correct? Whereas if people want to join.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're more than just a community. I didn't go deep enough into it, but we're actually a nation, a kingdom. We've established our own kingdom, our own country, so to speak, our own nation as co-creators. We've decided to plug out of the matrix and create our new own matrix. So we realize that obviously the system no longer serves us. Right. How money works, how laws work, even clothes, food, everything. We've decided to go back to the drawing board and say, if I were to design my own reality, how would I do it as a collective? And we sat down and we said, right, let's do it. Why not? Why just talk about it? Why can't we create? Why can't I be a king? Why can't I call myself King Agua Agbal Zizi Pinheiro? Why can't we have a royal family? Who says you have to be born into a royal family? Who says that? Right? So we create our own royal family. I declare myself a king and everyone else around me. We declare ourselves royals. We declare our own kingdom. We create our own flags, national anthems. We make our own clothes. We write our own constitution, our own laws that serve our interests, that are based on natural laws and universal laws. We create our own reality, literally, and we start by living it. Every country, every nation, every culture began exactly the same. Nothing ever woke up in America was just America. It began with a handful of people who did exactly what we're doing. Who said, hey, why can't we do our own thing and start our own reality, our own nation, our own country, our own, and this is what we're doing. So our plugins, or so to speak, our matrix that we're creating is the Kingdom of Pineal. We have a website. You can go on a website, you can read our manifesto, you can familiarize yourself with our principles, our ideals, our tenets, our ethos, our laws, our vision, our mission, what we're doing, where we're coming from, and most importantly, our future, where we're going. We've also got a Instagram, Pineal Foundation, a YouTube as well, Pineal Foundation. There's lots of information on there, videos, material you can read through, you can listen to, and just familiarize yourself with the reality that we're co-creating.
Beautiful, beautiful. So another thing which was interesting about me and my brothers and sisters growing up is that we were all raised vegetarians, and our whole entire family. There was 7 of us, including me, and then my mom and my dad. And later on, a great portion of us became vegans. But I remember when I was younger, I grew up in New York, and people would say, "You better eat meat. You're gonna die. What's wrong with you?" Later on, I became a chef. Right, I was cooking in corporate America. Executive chef, had so many titles for about 20 years, 20 something years. I done really, really well with myself. And then I dropped out and I became an entrepreneur. But now I see vegan stuff everywhere. It's in Burger King, it's in Chipotle, it's in all kinds of McDonald's. Wherever you go, it's everywhere. It's this big vegan wave going all around. And vegan doesn't necessarily equal healthy, but it does have its benefits and things of that nature. The reason why I bring this up is because a lot of people, they get really, like, for instance, when you're in corporate America and you have a role or something, they say there's 2 things you shouldn't talk about. You shouldn't talk about religion, and you shouldn't talk about politics, because those things could be very controversial. But now it's like, talking about veganism or, eating the regular standard American diet or the diet from, UK that most people eat, it becomes really controversial, and people don't like to talk about that because people's emotions get involved. So the question that I have for you is, when it comes to food, when it comes to eating, what does that look like? Is everybody plant-based? Do they go hunting? Is there one person that takes care of all of the food? Are you guys growing the food? Is there a farm, greenhouses? What is the whole scope of that?
Yeah, so really great question. We no longer participate in diet because there's death in diet. We call it living.
Live it, yes, yes.
So to give you context to what livity is consuming things that give you life, things that are alive, things that are not dead. Because let the dead bury the dead, as we've heard before.
Mm-hmm.
If you eat death, you become death.
Mm-hmm.
If you eat life, you become life. And what I mean by this in its broad term is, for us at least, our philosophy is do no harm. It's our biggest philosophy. If you want to change the world and you want to live in a peaceful world, you've got to be that change you wish to see. You've got to be peaceful yourself. That's the number one, before we talk about health and all of this other stuff. So if you don't want to see anyone being killed or anything being killed, stop contributing to any death. It's just a basic principle, right? Mm-hmm. So when you understand the laws or universal laws or the principles of cause and effect, I've decided when I had my awakening, I no longer wanted to participate in death. I didn't want anything that has a consciousness, anything that has emotions or feelings, at least sentient, as far as I can tell, to suffer any more than I would want to suffer. So I decided that I was not going to participate in the suffering of any other animals in any way, shape, or form. And that was my biggest reason for becoming a vegan, first and foremost. I didn't go into that space personally for health reason initially. It was really for moral reasons. And then the health, of course, I was also a chef, much like you, in my past life. I worked as a chef 15, 20 years. Similar path to yourself. So it was a big transition for me as well, coming from that corporate world of being a chef and then becoming vegan, and completely changing my ideals on what food was and re-educating myself. So yeah, as a community, we are vegan. That is our basis, meaning, in fact, we're not vegan, we're plant-based, to be more specific. We focus on eating foods that are as natural or as alkaline, if we can, as possible. But we're not so stringent, we're not so strict as to say you have to eat anything specifically. The broad term is whatever you eat is your business, as long as you're not harming others, you're not harming the world or the realm, so to speak, and you're not harming yourself either within your own awareness, whatever that harming yourself means. And people have different levels of perception and consciousness. So we have people in the community here who will say, for instance, white rice is harmful. I won't eat white rice. I'm going to eat only fruits, and they want to be fruitarian, and they're doing that, and we allow them to express that. There's some people who are trying to become breatharian, eat nothing at all. You do that. That's your thing. There are some people who are eating alkaline, and they say, well, I'll eat certain things. I've got my list of foods that I consider to be alkaline. You do that. There are some people who are saying, as long as it's plant-based and it's not processed, that's my diet, that's my liberty. You do that. Then there's some people who are a bit more broader and say, well, I'll push the boat. I'll have a couple of processed things here and there, within reason. Again, we're not so strict on what you are eating within the boundaries and the parameters of that. In terms of food, where we're at, we're really moving into a space of being self-sufficient, especially with where the world is going. In hindsight of this, a lot of us saw what is happening now coming way before it came. Hence, we initiated this action of starting this community off-grid, this new nation, this sovereign initiative that we're in, growing our own food, making our own clothes, looking after our own water, our own health, birthing our own futures, everything, being as independent as possible. We're not yet fully self-sufficient within the food space, because obviously it takes time before you become that. but we are certainly learning the process. A lot of us are townies. We all grew up in cities, and we're learning for the first time how to plant, how to grow food, what that means and what that looks like, the reality of it. We're still adjusting to the weather. We're learning about the soil, seeds. So in the experimental phase, the learning phase of learning to be sovereign and to be free. And we're doing really well. So, you know, we've got a fair amount of food that we eat off the land. Our water certainly is self-sufficient. It's from the land. And yeah, we buy a few things, maybe 50%, 50 to 60% of our food is bought from the stores and markets nearby.
Mhm.
But we make sure that we support organic, local, etc., etc., and eat as cleanly as possible.
Beautiful. What about the water? I know you said it's on the land. Is it well water? Is it coming from a stream, a river? What does that look like?
Yes, it's well water. So we have 7 wells on this farm that we're on. We
Mhm.
have 2 properties. There's 7 wells here, and we've got a really big spring on the other land as well. And the water comes from we're at the foot of the Estrela Mountains, which are the biggest mountains in mainland Portugal.
Okay.
And all the water basically trickles down from the top of the mountain down to the base where we are. We're literally at the foot of the mountain. Um, so yeah, our water is really clean, high vibration. We've got 7 wells here. Interesting, we're on a 7 Circles podcast.
Beautiful.
So synchronicity there. So our
Yeah.
land is all 7 wells.
Great, great. It's interesting when you look at nature. Everybody has a duty, a job that they're doing, but it doesn't feel like a job. It's not like, oh, I got to get up and I got to clock in. The bees, they do what they do because that's who they are. The ants, they do what they do because that's who they are. Everybody is just living out their purpose, and it comes together like a big fabric. Everybody's a little thread. You get this big, beautiful blanket of nature, right? And so when we look at a job, we look at it almost as like slavery in a way, like, oh man, we got to go. But it is necessary that everybody plays a part. And so the reason why I'm bringing this up is because what is that like in or on Pineal Foundation? Does everybody have an assigned duty? Do you say, okay, you're going to do this, you're going to be the chef, you're going to clean up, you're going to be the gardener, you're going to do whatever? Or does it just kind of naturally happen?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, actually, and it's a big debate that we often have even in the community quite often. But we're now finding a good equilibrium, and the reason for it is when we came together as people who had come from a system of control, so to speak,
Yeah.
where you're told you have to do something, where there's hierarchies and there's structures, and it's very linear and very masculine and very aggressive. You come into space in nature with like-minded people, and your visceral reaction is to be free. Now I can do what I want when I want. I don't have a boss anymore. I don't want to be told what to do, when to be, how to be. I'm going to be myself.
Mm-hmm.
And we certainly encourage that. That's what sovereignty and freedom is to an extent. But we learned very quickly that everything in nature has to have structure and order and hierarchy. These things are fundamental to any society, whether you're living off grid and you're sovereign and you're free, whether you're human, whether you're an animal, everything must have structure. So we went through a phase really as a community where for a season we were in free flow, what we call free flow. Everyone use your own initiative, do what you feel you need to do when you feel like you need to do it. No one will be asked or questioned. And you find that naturally some will be more hardworking than others. Some have more initiative than others. Some have more drive than others. Some are more intelligent than others. It's just facts of how things are.
Right.
And when this happens, it starts to breed resentment because you start thinking, hang on a minute, I'm passionate about making this work. I'm putting so much work, and there's some people who are just sat around smoking weed all day, for instance, and not doing anything.
Right.
So, so it creates a lot of imbalance and chaos, and it's lawless. And we realize that this isn't true sovereignty. There must be some sort of boundaries and structures and a society, really what we call a society. So we went back to the drawing board and said, we don't want to replicate what's in the matrix and have it so rigid and so controlling and so restricted. We want some sort of freedom, but we definitely need to have the same mechanisms of law and order that the matrix has. A big lesson you learn as well when you become responsible, you begin to really appreciate the matrix and the system. When I left the Matrix, I was like, I hate the Matrix, and it's all corrupt, it's all broken. We need to do things completely different. Governments are corrupt, elites are corrupt, everything is so bad.
Mm-hmm.
And then you come into sovereign space and responsibility, and you start thinking, oh my goodness, it's a big responsibility to be sovereign, to make decisions, to make difficult decisions, to make sure that everything is working. It's huge responsibility. And I know this is controversial, but I have a lot of respect for governments now. I have a lot of respect for the elites, because to make the world run the way it runs, it might not be how we want it to run, but it runs efficiently before all of this happened, because they're now dismantling it. But when they were happy for it to run, the world was running fantastically, right? We're all living and enjoying life, living that dream, the American dream, the Western dream. So all of that takes a lot of organization, intelligence, structure, law, all of those things. And they worked in our favor.
It's true.
And yeah, this is what we're now starting to learn, that actually, do you know what? You've got to have, we don't want to call them governments, but you've got to have structures where people are responsible, where certain people who have certain talents or certain skills or certain knowledge hold certain positions within the community. But what we're not going to do is have hierarchies where we have people who are seen to be above other people. So in our community, for instance, in our reality, someone who is maybe an administrator, or what we call a king or a spokesperson on behalf of the kingdom, is not any more important than someone who washes the dishes or someone who's in the gardens. Yeah. Every single one of the departments is crucial for us to thrive. Because if the gardener stops gardening, well, the person who's so-called king and spokesman starves, right?
Exactly.
So every component, every aspect, every pillar is just as important as the other. Our hierarchies are not based on power. They are based on structure and order, and not power or control.
I love this. I love this. My dad always told me that people need to stop being judged based upon what they do for a living. And I totally agree with that, because the garbage man or the dishwasher, right, it's just as important as any other position, like a football player or whatever have you, right? So a question that I want to ask you, because you guys do have tenets, you guys do have structures and things of that nature, which I totally understand. What about if somebody isn't following the structures, or they aren't participating in the way that they should? Here we have authority figures, we have policemen, so on and so forth. They have prisons, jails. I don't even think any of that is necessary, but I'm just curious, and I'm sure the people listening are as well too. How do you guys go about that? Is there a voting system? Is there something that you guys just personally talk to the other person, or do they get exiled where they can't come back? Or what is that looking like?
Yeah, so we don't have anything. So again, going back to the whole thing of that is so controlling or that is so rigid. We our philosophy and our tenets really believe that innately human beings are good. We're good social creatures. We have good within us. And certainly, if you come to join this community, you must have the essence of what we call good, so to speak. You must have some sort of moral compass. And a lot of the times when people are misbehaving, so to speak, it's because of trauma. It's because they're dealing with something. They're going through shadow work. There's traumas they're trying to release. So we approach these situations with compassion, with understanding, but also, most importantly, we hold each other accountable. That's how we do it. And how we hold each other accountable is through communication. So as a community, our policing measures are conversation, talking. We have meetings. If anything is not falling in line, we hold meetings, we sit down, and if it takes 2, 3, 4, we've had meetings for 8 hours sometimes, and no one leaves until we've resolved this. And we will meet, and we will talk, and we will talk until we find a consensus. And if we can't find a consensus, eventually we'll come to a mutual agreement, which is what normally happens. Someone will say, do you know what? This is too much for me. All this talking, say, well, if you're not willing to talk, if you're not willing to compromise, if you're not willing to work things out, then you're making the decision for yourself. We've never evicted anyone from the community. Many people have left on their own accord. No one's ever been asked to leave. No one's ever been pressured to leave, so to speak. But the pressure comes from self. When you're asked, when you're told to be accountable for your actions, and when you have your family or people that love you around you, and they're saying, this is what we're seeing, this is what we're observing, and there's a reasoning that happens back and forth, eventually you either have to fold and take accountability, or you jump off the ship and decide that I'm not yet ready to be fully responsible for my actions. And yeah, this
and
is
that's
always
it.
an agreement.
Right. And that's a key point right there, responsibility and accountability. Because I had this conversation with my girl not too long ago that when it comes to freedom, a lot of people think that they could write on a piece of paper or sign a piece of paper and they can earn their freedom, or whoever they think is oppressing them, they can buy their freedom, they can get their freedom. But freedom can never happen like that. That's liberty, which is something completely different. Freedom is an actual vibration. Freedom is actually taking control of your own vessel and being responsible for your actions and your thoughts and everything else. It's an actual frequency. And you know, a lot of people love to play the victim role, and we all get caught in that sometimes. We blame, complain, and explain. But you know, then we come back to reality and we have to realize that, hey, we're the one that's creating these situations. If we don't like something, we can change it just by changing our thoughts. And that's why I really like what you guys are doing, because it's not just talking, it's actually really making it happen. And looking at the you know, the actual reality of it. Like the fact what you said, like, yeah, you have to give it to some governments, even though we don't like everything that they're doing, so on and so forth. Yes, to a certain extent. Like if you go to a different country and then you come back to a Western country, you're like, wow, it's a big difference, right? And we know that there's past trauma and this and that and whatever, but just looking at it for what it is without being attached to it, you have to call an ace an ace. You know what I mean? So I definitely like that. What are some of the pros and cons? So like being in the Matrix, it definitely has its pros and it has its cons. And then being in Pineal Foundation, I'm sure also has its pros and its cons. Like for instance, when I lived in the woods, I didn't have anything. I lived off of the land. I went in there weighing 155. When I came out 2 months later, I was 135. But my perception, my mind was sharp. I didn't want to drink any no, I didn't want to take any cold hot showers. I didn't want to sleep on the bed. It felt funny when I was walking on the carpet. I just wanted to meditate wherever I went. I didn't want to eat any cooked food, and it just felt funny to me. I didn't even want to sleep on the bed. I wanted to sleep on the floor. Like I changed totally, and then slowly but surely, I came back to the Matrix. But one of the cons was is that sometimes it was uncomfortable being around all the elements like that. One time I remember looking at my leg and there were like 60 maybe mosquitoes on my leg. And I went like this to wipe them off and it was just a whole bunch of blood. You know what I mean? And so what I would do is I would climb the tree and hang up in the tree all day like a primate to get away from the mosquitoes. So there was pros and cons, pros and cons. And there's always this place inside of me that wants to go back to the woods and eventually I will get there. But right now I have responsibility and tithes that I made in this matrix. So until that time, you know, I'm not going to just leave my responsibilities. So my question for you is, what are some of the pros and cons of, you know, living in the matrix versus not living in the matrix?
The easiest and most concise way to really answer that question is through a meme that I came across not so long ago. And this meme had two pictures of two lions. One of the lions was in a zoo, and the other lion was out in the wild in Africa. And the caption said, and I'll read it, one of these lions has security, free guaranteed shelter, guaranteed food, Medicare, and the other lion has no assurances. Everything about his quality of life is his own responsibility. Right? So in some sense, both lions are kind of free. The one in the zoo is being looked after. He doesn't have to worry too much about too much. I don't have to worry about where my water is coming from. I just have to go into the supermarket. My food is there for me. I just have to open my tap. My water runs out. If I need clothes, I just have to go to the shop. I just have to get a job. The plugins of that matrix are already established. So it's much more comfortable to be in that space. It's much easier. It's much more comfortable. The other lion that's out in the wild, that's unplugged, that doesn't have the same plugins, has to look for its own water, or it will die of thirst. Has to look for its own food. It has to hunt for itself. Has to protect itself. Has to find ways to thrive on its own, right? So, but it's free. It's not in a zoo. It's not told when to sleep. It's not told what to do. It decides when and how it will do things. So this is exactly the same thing with what we're doing. It's very romantic to say living off grid and we've left the matrix and we're on our own. But the reality of it is the responsibility of being self-responsible is absolutely huge, really huge. You've got to really practice a level of detachment that is beyond anything you could have ever imagined. Really, really, on so many levels. Mentally, just mentally, we come from a system or from a world of extreme stimulation. From the moment you open your door in the matrix, in the street, there's so much stimulation. There's cars everywhere. There's people. There's billboards. There's things happening. There's always something to stimulate you. You come out here in nature, you're awake. A lot of us sleep in tents or very or log cabins, and you open the door and it's quiet. It's silent. That stimulation isn't there. You've got to learn to stimulate yourself. You're left with your own thoughts. There's no distractions. All of a sudden, your traumas come through. You're now having to deal with things you never thought you had within you. Because in the matrix, you never get to deal with those things because there's so much distraction. You never ever get a chance to actually hear your own thoughts, to hear your own soul, to heal from your traumas.
Yeah.
And when you live in this environment, all of a sudden, these shadows appear. Whew! There it is, that shadow. And the shadow work begins. Mm-hmm. And it's really painful. So that's happening mentally. That's happening emotionally. Then there's the physical aspect. We've got to eat, guys, if you want to be self-sufficient. I've got to learn how to start growing. I've never grown anything in my life. Where do I even begin? What do seeds look? What does a watermelon seed look like when it's in the ground? How do you plant? What is a seedling? What does that even mean? You're asking yourself all these questions. A well. Oh my goodness, how do you clean a well? Do you clean a well? I mean, what happens if this happens? Is it clean water? How do you know the water's clean? There are all these questions you have to ask yourself about how to thrive without relying on mom and dad being the government, the system. You're on your own. So those are the cons of it. But at the same time, it's a pro, because the more you start to learn these things and overcome these things, the more powerful you really become, the more powerful you start to feel. So 3 years into this, we're speaking to some people in the matrix saying, oh my God, electricity is so expensive, and amenities, and the water is so toxic, even bottled water. Even now, my distiller distilling the water, the electricity is so expensive, I can't even distill the water. And we're like, wow, I'm so glad we learned how to clean wells, how to look after our own water. We don't have those problems at all. Everything is just provided for us. It was hard the first few years, months that we're doing it, but now that we're doing it, it's so much easier. Same thing with everything else that we're doing. The more we're really learning to be self-sufficient, the easier life becomes in the long run. So it's harder in the short run when you're starting, like anything, like a business.
Right.
When you start off, you put in the hours, you put in the shift, you're not getting any profits, all your money is going, everything, and you're gambling, you're risking. You're like, if this doesn't work, I'm putting all my savings into this. But you have faith that when it does work and I become that millionaire, I can relax while everyone else is still working and toiling for somebody else. It's the same thing with sovereignty. Yeah, so this is a long game. It's not a short game. To do this, you've really got to be dedicated to the long-term vision. You've got to be selfless. You can't be thinking about your comforts in the here and now. You've got to be looking at the bigger picture, the future, where we're going. So we know for a fact that everything that we're doing now, the sacrifices that we're making, many of us left our businesses, we left homes, we left comforts. Some of us are sleeping in tents in the cold, we, cutting wood, really uncomfortable situations from where we've come from. And it gets easier every year as you acclimatize and adapt. But we also know that we'll get to a stage one day where, because we've cultivated this space, we're going to have the abundance and the wealth that maybe people who haven't cultivated the space have not had or have not done. So it's really a labor of love, and it's a long game.
Yes. There's a friend of mine, actually a personal mentor by the name of Les Brown, famous motivational speaker. And he will always say, if you do what's easy, later on will be hard. But if you do what's hard, and then later on will be easy. So that's exactly what I'm getting from what you're saying, putting the groundwork in, making things happen. The question that I wanted to ask you is that, would you lose, no, what you don't use, you lose. Like, and also you could say it's what you don't move, you lose. Like, if you don't move your arm, eventually it atrophies and then you end up losing your arm. And so I say that because we are more than human beings. We are creators, we are gods, we are these beautiful, magnificent and energetic packages, right? And there's so much more that we can do. And when we live in these environments like the Matrix, we begin to rely on external things, technology and whatever, and then we forget. Like back in the days before cell phones even came out, a lot of people could remember 10 or 20 phone numbers in their head. Nowadays, you don't even know your mom's phone number, and this is the reality of it. So I bring this up because I had the pleasure of interviewing so many fascinating people. I've interviewed Ali Tom Elamine, who's a breatharian. The longest he went without eating was for 2 years. I interviewed a lady recently by the name of Nikki, and I just took her workshop. She does something, I can't remember the name. Forgive me, Nikki, if you're watching this. But just check out the channel. But she does something where she blindfolds her children completely where they can't see. And then she will pull up something and say, hey, what color is this? And they would go like this and touch it and say, hey, that's orange. And when I took the workshop, I did really, really well, and it boosted my confidence up. I had the pleasure of interviewing a guy by the name of Wayne. I gave him the name of Master Wayne, and he has the power to move objects with his hand. And he did this on my YouTube channel as well too. And we have so many gifts, that we don't know of, right? Including another one of my friends named Nikki. She talks about the psychic abilities. While being in this environment, have you noticed some of your abilities starting to come online? And also, so many people nowadays are fascinated with these abilities, the X-Men and the Spider-Man and the Avengers and all these Marvel characters. I just kind of want you to speak on that a little bit, because I know you have a passion for this and knowledge on this as well too. So just kind of express how you would like to express.
Yeah. But before I touch on that, I just want to go back to the last question, because there's a really good plug-in that I think deserves to really be addressed. And that is to really make this commitment to be off-grid and to live this way. You cannot do this on your own. You need to be in a community. You need to be around other people. You need human beings. We're social creatures. And as such, to thrive, you have to be in common unity with other beings, with other kings, magicians, co-creators. So if you try, and the more of you that are in common unity, that come together with one mind, with one vision, with one co-creative force, the easier it becomes, the quicker it manifests, etc., etc. The magic accelerates. So I really wanted to plug that in. It's really important for those who want to go off grid. Don't do it on your own. Find your tribe. Find people you resonate with and plug in to something that is already moving, or start something together as a tribe.
It's interesting, because when you look at the word community, if you break it apart, it's really unity. So it's like oneness. So you need everybody to come together to be a oneness. That's the community. So I just thought about that, but yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. But to answer your question, yes, superpowers, so to speak.
Right.
We certainly are supernatural beings. There's no doubt about this. This is my view and my perspective. Every single one of us, within us, we have this thing called a soul. And your soul is what we might call the essence of God. It is an infinite potential of energy that is within you. It knows everything. It has everything coded within it. And it's incarnated into this thing called a human body. And the human body is a carbon form, meaning what it's done is it's suppressed a lot of the light that your soul has. And the light is what you call that electromagnetic force. And that electromagnetic force is what we call superpowers. You're able to magnetize things and electrify things. That's all magic is. It's the ability to magnetize, pull things, and electrify, push things. So it's a push and pull, a yin and yang. So when we're in these carbon bodies, the more dense your body is, the less electromagnetic frequency that you can emit to be able to impact the world around you, right? And this is what we call being in sleep. When people say you're asleep or you're not awake, your soul's light is dimmed. And this dimming happens through, again, eating dense foods, being in dense environments, dense information. Anything that's dense adds carbon, 666, the mark of the beast, onto the human body, onto the carnal body. So the awakening, or the journey of awakening, is awakening the light within you, the soul within you. You're a light being within you. And by doing that, you start to raise the frequency of your electromagnetic force, the force within. May the force be with you, right? That's a true story. Absolutely. So we all have this electromagnetic force within us. And everything in our reality also has an electromagnetic vibration. This telephone or this device, this plastic, whatever it is, has an electromagnetic signature. Like in the Matrix, it's got a code to it. If my electromagnetic being within me awakens or is able to see beyond the carbon of this, beyond, first of all, the carbon of my eyes, beyond the carbon of what is covering the electromagnetic frequency of this, I'm able to interact with this material. I can code it using my will and intention. I can tell it to move. I can tell it to lift. I can tell it to float. I can tell it to do anything using power of the mind. All is mind, of the will. And Absolutely. Also the heart, the force of the heart. So this is really what we call the journey to ascension, learning to become inside out, learning to really override the carbon, the beast, 666 of the body, and really allowing the inner self, the higher self, the light being within you to start to shine through and really overtake the body until eventually you literally become inside out. Your soul is outside of your body. And you see this with a lot of the Vedics. They have these blue beings on you've seen all those blue beings. That's what they're showing you. They're showing you that the living waters that are within you, which is blue, has now transcended outside of the carnal. Your carnal is now being eaten by the infinite, by the Ouroboros, if you like, the snake of life that's within you, the Kundalini. And this is the journey to ascension. But this is like really the high esoteric stuff, like the deeper meaning to the esoteric journey, which is a whole nother sphere. But to answer your question, absolutely, we are supernatural beings. We are infinite beings within us, but we're locked within the cells of an infinite restrictive body and dimension. And really now, as certain energies lift, we're being given a push to be able to transcend those carnal spaces through various things like acceptance, meditation, integration, shadow work, all those things that you have to go through. It's a process that you have to go through. It's not something that just happens. It's something that you have to slowly work through. However, I will say this. We're not all the same. A lot of us, like we said, have different superpowers, have different gifts, have different ages. There are some souls who've incarnated 1,000 times, for instance. They've been around the block 1,000 times. They've been in other dimensions many times. There are some souls who are just 3 years old. This is their third lifetime as a soul within a physical space. So they're brand new, they're babies. There are some souls who in past lifetimes unlocked certain things, and they are now starting to remember those superpowers because they achieved or they unlocked those things in a past lifetime. And they're starting to remember those cells, those supernatural forces within them at different levels. So for instance, myself, for me, it's precognition. This is where I see my superpower within me. It's my mind. I have a mind that's able to read things precognitively, ahead of time, before time, and being able to calculate scenarios and make chess moves, so to speak, before certain things or events happen. Similar to Professor X in the X-Men. Something similar to that, and other characters that have had similar superpowers. So I've had a small glimpse, tiny small taste of that. And this is what I'm really honing my skills to make sure that I get better and better at doing this, being able to project my thoughts, my emotions, my feelings, my words, how to spellcast in the right way, how to influence reality using the will of my mind and my thoughts and my projections. And this is my personal path. Someone else will say it's invisibility. Someone else will say it's telekinesis. Someone else will say it's astral projection. We're all different. We all have different superpowers.
Correct. You know, when we look at the chakra system, a lot of people are starting to understand Kundalini, and they know the main 7 chakras in the most common school of thought. What I want to know is, why is it that a lot of people are so fixated with the pineal gland? Because when you look at when you look at the chakra system, you know, the crown would be like the capstone. You have your heart chakra, you have your root, et cetera, et cetera. But a lot of people, the pineal gland, when we think about plant medicine, whether if it's mushrooms or ayahuasca or something like that, open up your third eye, open up your pineal gland. So I asked you that because the name of your foundation is the Pineal Foundation. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so my perspective and my view on it is our chakra system are kind of like portals or gateways to higher dimensions of self, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So each chakra represents a layer of magic, so to speak, or a layer of deeper understanding of oneself on many, many levels. And as human beings in this form, because we've come to this earth to experience, first and foremost, experience is the most important thing. And through the experiencing, you are learning about self and the outside world. And through that process of learning, you are growing and expanding your awareness. And by expanding your awareness, you become closer to God. And God is all your memories that are already stored within you. Now, your memories, as far as I'm concerned, are stored in what's known as your pineal gland. This is the transmitter. This is like the signal. This is like the portal between heaven and earth. All the other chakras are really portals of self within. For instance, your root chakra, which has to do with security, which has to do with safety, which has to do with the grounding, is a very carnal thing. It's an earthly thing. It's a carnal thing. And it's something that you must learn to, first of all, embrace, to love, to integrate. Same with your sacral chakra, sexual energy, right? It's not to be afraid of sexual energy. It's not to demonize sex. You're actually meant to learn to, first of all, accept that conquering sexual energy, conquering that demon and integrating it into my spiritual life is how I'm able to transcend that carnal form. Same with the solar plexus, the heart chakra, the throat chakra. So we're on this journey of learning to accept ourselves, our sins, our deadly sins, accept that I'm in a carnal form. I'm the devil because I've lived. Lived backwards is devil. Evil backwards is live. The moment you're inside carnal form, you are in a devilish realm, in a devilish form. You're doing devilish things. But again, we've been programmed to fear things like the devil, to fear things like evil. Those things are part of life. There's dark and there's light. You must learn to embrace your darkness and your light. This is true, high initiate esoteric knowledge. So I'm giving a disclaimer here. Some people will hear this and they go triggered and they'll say, I can't believe what you're saying. This guy's a Satanist. That's fine. That's where you're at. But what I can tell you is that evil and good do not exist. We all embody evil and good. Transcending it is learning to accept the evil within you, learning to love the evil within you, learning to love the evil you see in others, and then learning to integrate your own evil for a greater good. And not to say you do evil things for evil purposes. You learn to accept the evil within you and integrate it for a greater good. Got to repeat that. It's really important. Yeah. So this is where you stop spiritually bypassing, which a lot of us do. And I'm still working through a lot of spiritual bypassing that I've been programmed to do. We become spiritual and we say, oh, I can't have certain thoughts. I can't embody certain things. I can't eat certain things because this is now evil. It's not spiritual. This practice or this thing, because it's labeled this by society, by religion, by spirituality as evil. I can't embody it anymore. I have to distance myself from it. And we try and sugarcoat it. And then we create chaos within ourselves because that demon is there. And then we feel guilt, we feel shame when we backslide, or when we do certain things. Conquering the devil is accepting it. A big one is pornography, right? If you're a man, we all know that if you've come from the matrix, we've all struggled with pornography. I don't care how spiritual you are. I don't care how enlightened you are. You have had a pornography issue and probably still do even now to some extent, right? The true healing, the true growth when it comes when you accept it and you say, you know what? I accept that I enjoy watching pornography. It's something that for some reason, the devil within me needs to conquer. So instead of fighting it and pretending I'm not going to do it and being in this state of, accept it, I'm going to start watching pornography and not be ashamed of it. I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to tell people, guys, I have a pornography problem. I watch pornography, but I'm working through it. It's all good. Me and that demon, we're working through it. The moment you do that and you show the devil, that demon can no longer conquer you. Demons love to be in the shadows. When you don't expose your demons and they're hidden, they love being in the dark. The moment you bring it out and you show your demon and you reveal it to the world, it doesn't like that. They start to disintegrate. That's how you tame your demons. But religions and society has told us to shame our demons, has told us you can't admit, you can't admit to certain things, you can't admit to certain thoughts and certain behaviors. And that just perpetuates that demonic system that we're in.
It's so powerful. I made a video and I was talking about how I'm a liar. And I realized this one day, and I just kept saying that I'm a liar, I'm a liar, I'm a liar in my room by myself. And it was the most liberating thing that I've ever felt, man. I was like in it. And then I was like, wow, there's power in that. Like just knowing that and accepting it, you can grip it and you can change now. You can own it. And that's the I think they will call it the paradigm or something like that. Whereas if you blame something or you hide something, you don't have control over it. But the minute you own it and you accept it, now you can control the energy and you can harness it and move it in directions that will benefit you.
Absolutely. That is the key. That is the key to true sovereignty and liberty. It's owning your demons. That's what we're here on earth to do. We're here to really, all the mystics, Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, that's what they taught us, right? To learn to own your demons, to learn to face yourself, your shadows, and then integrate them. But before you can integrate them, you've got to accept them. You've got to compromise with your demon, right? So for a long time, if you've had a demon, I'm going to use pornography because this is a really big one, especially for men. If you've got a demon that's pornography, the first thing is admitting it and not being ashamed of it and saying, do you know what? Oh man, I get these urges to watch pornography. Or if it's not pornography, it's sexual promiscuity, sleeping around. Admitting it, first of all. And the first step, once you admit it, is not saying, now that I've admitted, I'm going to stop. Carry on doing it, but now you're doing it with awareness. You're not doing it in hiding. You're not ashamed of it. Yeah. You bring it out to the world and you expose yourself. You expose your demon. The moment you do that, the feelings of sin start to disintegrate. You now own it. You are now in control. You're now in charge. Your demon doesn't dictate to you. That guilt and that shame is no longer there because the only person that can judge is yourself. When you feel other people judging you for something, it's because you're judging yourself within yourself, right? So when you start to not judge yourself and accept your demons, who else can judge you? If I say to people, I'm spiritual, but I have a pornography addiction, what are people going to say to me? I've already exposed myself. They can't say anything to me. It's like, oh, well, okay. They'll only respect you. They'll only say, wow, bravo for being brave to actually admit something despite the appearance of you being so enlightened, despite the journey that you're on, despite the wisdom that you have, despite the knowledge that you have. So that's true wisdom. That's true maturity. That is truly becoming an ascended master. And once you do that, you start to integrate those demons. You don't get rid of them. You don't get rid of your ego. You start to learn to tame your ego and control your ego. You are now in the driving seat through your pineal. The pineal is where everything is transmitted from. So when you use this to control everything else and not everything else controlling this, which is what the Matrix has done, our lower chakras control the pineal, control our thinking, our urges, our emotions control our thinking. Our thinking is what manifests the actions, right? So when you're in your emotions, you are always in reaction. You don't think, you don't process what you're doing. When you don't have a good solar plexus, when it's overriding your thought processes, again, you're in reaction. Your sexual energy is out of balance when your sacral chakra is overriding your pineal. So it's freeing this first. You free this, everything else starts to flow. This now controls everything else.
Thank you.
And this is why they poison the pineal gland, fluoride and all these things. They have to poison this first. This is the portal to God. This is the doorway, the mind.
Wow. I don't want to take up a lot of your time, and I do appreciate this conversation. Are you willing to hang on maybe like a half hour more?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good to go.
Beautiful. Thank you. So I want to talk about where we are as a society. We know within the past 2 years, 3 years, it has been phenomenal. It has been life-changing for so many people, both positive and both negative. So many things are appearing, such as AI, chat, GPT, electrical cars all over the place. Like in California, by the year 2035, they're not going to be able to have any more gas cars. I talked about the veganism thing. the singularity, the CB, what is it called? The crypto, not cryptocurrency, but the digital currency that they want to make, instead of the dollar bill. There's so many things that I'm not even thinking about right now. And then, of course, we know the injections and all that kind of stuff, and the passports and things of that nature. It's just a lot going on. It's a lot going on, and it's good because it's making people evolve and rise to a higher occasion. That's kind of how Seven Circles got started. I was like, what can I do? How can I contribute to help to raise the frequency? And then Seven Circles was born out of the chaos. I guess, I heard a lot of your clips on Instagram, and I know you have an opinion on this. What is your opinion on where we are and where we are going? How do you see this whole entire thing panning out? What do you think the end game is? I know there's so many belief systems and so many school of thoughts on where we are. Yeah, what is your take on that?
Yeah, so it's a really broad question. So I'm going to try and really make it as concise as I possibly can. In a nutshell, so to speak, humanity or life on Earth is going through a transformative or metamorphosis, a change, a reset, a shift. We are upgrading. Some would say we're coming out of one age into another, from the Kali Yuga into the Dwapara, whatever Yuga you think. We're going from one age to the other to another. And this just basically means we have the opportunity to upgrade our DNA, to shed some layers of that carbon 666 we're talking about, right? So there are universal forces, so to speak, that dictate basically the pace, the scenes, the plots of what it is to be human. So we're not completely sovereign ever. There are certain parameters and guidelines that are dictated by the stars, so to speak, literally the stars above us. And we call this the astrology of our reality. And within that, there are all these different seasons, just like there's summer and there's winter and there's autumn and there's spring. And we shift in and out of different seasons. Right now, we're coming out of a season, let's call it winter, and we're going into a spring season. We're springing into spring of consciousness. Now, to sum it up, there are forces or beings in our universe that are not just human. We have many, many other, I'm going to call them humanoid beings, other beings. Some people call them the Anunnaki, the Lemurians, the extraterrestrials. We live in a multi-dimensional universe with many, many things going on. So there are certain beings who, at certain times, let's say in the winter of consciousness, they've been the gatekeepers of our realm, of our consciousness. They've been shepherding us, looking after us whilst we were asleep, so to speak. And now we're getting to a stage where we're starting to spring into action. We're going to the spring of consciousness. And the cosmic forces, the cosmic rays are now increasing. We call it prana, you might call it vril, is now increasing our electromagnetic capacity. We're picking up more signals for those who have the capacity to pick up those signals. Now, there are some forces, I'll call them the disagreeable forces, who are here to keep a balance at the same time, because they're not totally evil. Remember, evil and good are subjective, but they're here to keep a balance. And their balance is to make sure that those who are not yet ready to be completely self-sufficient, they will continue to look after them. And those who are completely ready to now become sovereign souls, to become magicians and wizards and kings and queens, they can move into that space as quickly or as slowly as possible over the next, I would say, 20 years, from 2020 up to 2040. So this is the space that we're in now. We're in that transition of the Great Reset. And many people will fall back into being looked after by the state or by the system or by certain forces because they do not have the capacity or the spiritual maturity just yet as a soul to look after themselves. They will become even more dependent on the inorganic. When we talk about the transhuman agenda, it has already happened. We are already in a transhuman form already. Like you said, before we could remember so many digits in our minds, phone numbers. Now we can't. We're hooked to external devices. That's already a transhuman. Your capability to remember, your capability to do certain things, to grow your own food, to influence certain things has been diminished. But at the same time, for those who are plugging in, it's being replenished and actually being topped up. And this is what we're going through. This is the noise and the chaos that is happening right now. So the world is splitting into two worlds, the inorganic and the organic. The inorganic is going to separate you further and further away from your light being self and entomb your light being into an even more mechanical tomb, even more mechanical than this body. This body is already a machine. This is already an engineered machine. Mm-hmm. This body is already something that was already tampered with. This is not the original body of a human, right? We all know the story of the Anunnaki. Let us make man in our own image, in the Bible, all of that. This already is a robot. We're already in robots. So we think robots are coming. No, this is the robot. But this robot is at least still organic to some form. The robots that are now coming won't even have that organic plug-in at all. They won't even have any form of organic structure like cells and blood and all of these things, as we know what's coming. And then they're going to be putting souls into these inorganic containers. And by doing that, that soul will have the opportunity, for some, they will see it as that. And for others, they will have what's the opposite of opportunity? The opposite of opportunity of being entombed in those spaces. Mm. So they won't be able to reincarnate. They'll be inside their machine bodies for thousands of years, maybe millions of years, in the same reality, looping and looping and looping. You won't have the opportunity to grow, to expand. You will just be in a set box of reality. You will not be able to create anything. Everything will be created for you through the AI, the artificial. And then there are those who will move away from that, the organic, the balance, the yin and yang, the balance, who will become more and more supernatural. The more they move away from this inorganic AI, they'll start to become a more organic intelligence, a more organic magic. Because artificial, what we call AI, is magic, right? When we say technology, technology is inorganic magic. The same technology that we say mobile phones, flying cars, all of that, it's just magic, right? But it's inorganic magic. On the other side, we're going to have organic people over time who are going to start to unlock more of their light being within them, more of their organic potential, more of their organic magic, and they will have the same technological advances as the inorganic. In other words, telepathy, telekinesis, clairvoyance, precognition, hydrokinesis, all these superpowers are technologies. It's the same thing. When you say technology and magic, you're talking about the same thing. It's just the spectrums of it. One's organic, one's inorganic. And this is the split that is now happening. And this happens over many cycles. This isn't the first time this is happening. This happened in the 1800s during the whole Tartaria thing. I'm sure you've looked into this Tartaria, and what happens with the mud floods and the great reset of that time. So this happens periodically. Yeah. So we're just at the same junction at the moment. The split is now happening. Some will be pushed towards the inorganic and others will be pushed towards the organic. And the organic will have to really break free from all inorganic attachments to be able to fully embrace the organic. You have to almost die. The inorganic has to die. But that death isn't dying as in transcending your physical form in this. It's a death of, it's a spiritual death. It's a mental death. It's an emotional death. It's not so much a physical death. And by doing that, you will then start to awaken. The phoenix will rise within you and will start to become the titans that we were in the past, the great wizards, the great magicians that we were in the past. This is where we're going. And it will take time because the healing process takes time, the transition takes time, the transmutation takes time, the shadow work takes time. But that's the journey some are on and some are on the other journey. We're not all born the same. So, and it's not meant to be like that. If we're all on the same journey, this game would be boring. It would have no purpose. We have to have some who are going to the darkness, some going into the light, some who are rising, some who are falling, some are awakening, some are falling asleep. This is what makes all of this so exciting and so beautiful.
Mm. This has
you
been
just have to know thyself.
What was that?
You just have to know thyself. Am I awakening or am I sleeping? Am I ascending or am I descending? And then decide for yourself in the timings. So timing is crucial, right? So what we're doing at Pineal, we know that at some point, Jonathan, you will be doing exactly what we're doing. We know your time is coming. It's not yet time for you because there are things that you need to do where you're at now, which are important for your journey. And it doesn't mean that you're behind us or you're lesser than us. It doesn't mean that at all. It just means that you're playing a role where you are that adds to what everybody else is doing. At Pineal, our thing is to be the pioneers, to set a precedent. Yours might be to connect. Yours might be awaken the masses for when the exodus happens, which is what you're doing through your platform, through your influence, through whatever it is you're doing, wherever you are. There will come a time where that separation will have to happen for you, right? Within the next, I would say, 3 to 5 years, really, where you'll have no choice. So the things you said, I've got responsibilities, those responsibilities eventually will fade away. There'll be no more responsibilities. It'll be very clear. It's time for me to make that jump. And you'll find your tribe. Wherever that tribe is, it might be in the US, it might be somewhere else. There are all these tribes that are going to pop up around the world that are going to become self-sufficient nations or kingdoms or societies. And from there, the new earth, or what we call the 5D earth, will start to rebuild, the organic.
I love that. Thank you for that.
And then we're going to have, we'll have 2 worlds existing at the same time. We'll have 2 worlds existing at the same time. We're going to have the inorganic world of smart cities where people are robots. They can't leave their zones. They're controlled. Every movement, everything is controlled. But they are well looked after. They never have to worry about being sick or being ill, or doctors, about food, about everything. They'll own nothing and they will be happy. They'll be well looked after by the system.
That's
and I truly believe that when they say you'll own nothing and be happy, they will be happy. Those in that system. Then there are those of us who will also own nothing and be happy, but we'll be sovereign. We won't be looked after by the AI, by the algorithms, by the whatever that system is. We will be looking after ourselves and each other in an organic space. And those 2 worlds will be in parallel. And sometimes those 2 worlds won't be so far away from each other. For instance, the city you're in might get evacuated, and most of the people will be moved to a smart city grid that's already equipped for that. And then a little society will emerge in the city that you're in, and that society will rebuild this organic paradigm. And the 2 worlds will be a few miles away from each other, potentially, existing at the same time. Just like in the past reality, we had villages in Africa, people in mud huts with spears, hunting, and not so far away cities where people are in cars and living in skyscrapers. 2 totally different realities, but in the same space. The same thing is about to happen, but on an even more extreme capacity.
This conversation has been great, man. I truly appreciate it. I hope that everybody's watching has, received all of the jewels that you have been dropping. It's just been phenomenal. I hope that in the future that you agree to come back on, because I would love to do this again. Is there anything that you would love to express before I ask you your final 2 questions?
No, I just want to say thank you. And yes, absolutely. I'd love to come back, and maybe you can interview someone else from the community the next time, so you have a different perspective.
That'd be great.
So we encourage diversity and different perspectives, and that's what true sovereignty is. So I don't speak on behalf of everyone in the community. We're all the same, but we're all different at the same time. So yeah, maybe you can open the opportunity next time for someone else from the community to share their perspective of the same things I've shared. But thank you so much for your time. And yes, your family now. We're connected, your soul tribe.
Yes, absolutely. And by the way, congratulations on the new addition to your family.
Give thanks. New additions too.
Additions. Okay, got you. I missed that. The final 2 questions. Number 1 is for you. What is your personal definition of success?
My personal definition of success. Wow, I don't think I've ever been asked that before. My personal definition of success is being able to live my life moment to moment with the awareness that this is a game, I am a character, and I shouldn't take things too seriously, and not let my emotions or my thoughts or things that send me into a space of fear or anxiety override my higher knowing. And this is an ongoing thing. So for me, that's what success is. Success is really being in a mindset where whatever is happening, no matter how scary it might seem, no matter how uncertain it might seem, I can always remind myself, hey, don't take it too seriously. Smile. It's all good. This is a game. It's a dream. You're dreaming. This too shall pass. You're good. That's success for
Beautiful,
me.
beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Final question. There has been many people that have passed away, that have went on to a different realm. They left their body, or some people took their bodies with them. The question that I have for you is, if you had an opportunity to sit down with somebody for a day and pick their mind and ask them as many questions and kind of engage in many conversations with them, other than family members or friends that may have passed, who would you want to speak to with that have passed away, or that have passed away already?
Ooh, wow, that's a slightly emotionally charged question for me. My son passed away. Um,
It couldn't be a family.
Family.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm sorry about that, by the way.
No, no, don't be sorry. It's a beautiful. It was a beautiful transcendence, and it's all meant to be. There's nothing to be sorry about.
Mm,
But thank you at the same time.
absolutely.
Um, who? This might sound egotistical. It might sound maybe, but there isn't anybody really that I would consider. Um, there isn't anybody that I would consider I would want to speak to or meet, because I feel like everything that I need to know is already within me. If I have to give you my truest, honest answer, I would say it's myself. I'm still dead within me. I haven't yet fully actualized my full self.
Mhm.
So if there's anyone that I want to meet, it's me, the
I
real
love
me
that.
that is within me. When I meet that real me and ask the real me, and the real me tells me about all our adventures in all our lifetimes and our past lifetimes, that's those are the stories I want to hear. Wow, we did that in a past lifetime, and we were that, and this is what happened. That's what I look forward to.
That's a mag that's a magnificent response, man. I like that. I like that so much. Zizi, it has been a pleasure. Thank you so much. I hope that you have a great day, great week, great year, great month, great year, and a great life. My name is Jonathan. Thank you for tuning into Seven Circles. Until next time, peace.
Give thanks.
There we go, man. That is it. I appreciate you so much. I definitely I'm looking forward to connecting with other members in your community. And yeah, much love and respect and light to everyone that you guys are, building with. It's just magnificent. And thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you.
Give thanks, Jonathan. Thank you so much for your time and your space. We send you love. I appreciate you, and yeah, glad tidings.
Cool. Take care, brother.
Ciao.
Bye.